Good evening. It's Monday, October 20th. I'm Laura Cornfield, and this is IBA News, broadcasting from Jerusalem. A team of Israeli search and rescue workers this morning found the body of Michal Gili Cherkesky of Givatayim, missing since the deadly avalanche hit the popular Annapurna trekking circuit 6 days ago. 36-year-old Cherkesky is the fourth Israeli to die in what has been described as one of Nepal's worst mountain disasters. IDF Captain Tamar Ariel, 24, of Mesuot Yitzchak, Agam Luria, 23, of Kibbutz Yifat, and Nadav Shoham, 30, of Yehoshaya, lost their lives in the deadly blizzard that erupted in the mountains last Tuesday. 39 people from Israel, Canada, India, Japan, Poland, and Slovakian countries, as well as locals, died in the disaster, many as they tried to descend the trail when the storm struck. Authorities in Nepal said at least 40 people remain unaccounted for. More than 500 people were said to be trekking at the time the blizzard and subsequent avalanche struck. Yesterday, 7 Israelis injured in the storm arrived in Israel and were hospitalized in Hadassah and Tel HaShomer medical centers, suffering from frostbite. Israeli rescue staff from Harel Insurance remain in Nepal dealing with the tragedy.
This avalanche was a very strong avalanche. I think all the people that been outside didn't anticipate how strong this avalanche will be, and the consequences was tragic, and we're sorry for that.
Even though some hikers are still missing in the avalanche, others, including Israelis, have been arriving at Annapurna, determined to go ahead with their planned trek.
People are still attracted to trekking in Nepal, even like accidents like this can happen anywhere and any time. It's very unfortunate, but I don't think it will affect the trekking much.
9 Jewish families moved into homes in the East Jerusalem neighborhood of Silwan last night, a move that is likely to draw international condemnation. Their entry brings the number of Jewish families living in the predominantly Arab neighborhood to 17. President Reuven Rivlin criticized the move, emphasizing while it is Israel's right to insist on building in and around Jerusalem, such decisions must be made by the authorities. Our capital city cannot be built by stealth apartments in the middle of the night, he said. Taking advantage of the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, members of Hamas's military wing, Izzadin al-Qassam, have begun rebuilding attack tunnels damaged during Operation Protective Edge. Details published in the Arab daily El Risala newspaper said a reporter who accompanied the Hamas operatives was not permitted to enter one of the tunnels with them because they feared it may collapse. The report came just days after Israel eased up restrictions, permitting truckloads of cement and construction material to enter the Gaza Strip under the supervision of the United Nations. An Israeli hospital recently treated the daughter of Ismail Haniyeh, Hamas leader in the Gaza Strip. Tel Aviv's Ichilov Hospital revealed yesterday that 2 weeks ago the hospital discharged Haniyeh's daughter, who underwent emergency treatment. Palestinian officials said the daughter suffered complications after undergoing a routine procedure in Gaza. Officials asked to refrain from divulging details in respect for her privacy. Major General Yoav Mordechai, commander of the government activities in the territories, coordinated her entry into Israel to undergo the medical treatment. Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman confirmed that Hamas is starting to rebuild its terror infrastructure, but expressed hope that Israel's monitoring system will prove to be effective. Speaking to Israel Radio, Lieberman also said that Israel must soon make a decision about Iran's nuclear program. The foreign minister said that the government needs to make decisions regardless of what the world thinks. Referring to the possible use of a military option against Iranian nuclear facilities, Lieberman quoted the famous line from the film The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, saying, "If you want to shoot, shoot, don't talk." Lieberman added that it is time for a serious consideration of the threat with a clear head. At the end of the day, he said, the responsibility lies with us, not with anyone else. Switching gears, Lieberman lashed out at Balad MK Hanin Zoabi, who compared the Israeli Air Force to Islamic State. Lieberman called Zoabi a terrorist that needs to be sent to prison for many years. He also called for Zoabi's passport to be revoked and for Balad to be removed from the Knesset. Turning to the Rabbi Yoshiao Pinto corruption case, the High Court today delayed a ruling on the plea bargain agreement with the controversial rabbi that was expected to be approved in the Tel Aviv District Court in 2 days' time. The move was prompted by Pinto having been highly vocal in claiming his innocence after the plea bargain was reached. Pinto claimed that he had been stabbed with 1,000,000 knives and is the most persecuted man in this generation. The court found the statement to have been in direct violation of the plea deal. At the same time, the rights group Ometz filed a petition calling for a criminal investigation into Pinto's accuser, Police Superintendent Ephraim Bracha. Pinto allegedly bribed Bracha in order to receive information into a corruption case being waged against Pinto's charity, Chazon Yeshaya. Bracha's attorneys say that Pinto is attempting to take revenge, and the case has made law enforcement into a tool in the hands of a criminal's desire for vengeance. The second Shoshinsky Committee today issued its findings regarding the compensation due to the state for the use of natural resources by private companies. The bottom line is the companies will be charged between 25 and 42% in taxes. That is expected to bring in about 500 million shekels per year to the Treasury. As a result of the findings, Israel's Chemicals announced that it will move its investments overseas and it will be forced to fire many workers. The appeal of convicted murderer Roman Zadorov was heard today in the Supreme Court. Zadorov was convicted in 2006 for the murder of 13-year-old Tair Rada in a school in Katzrin on the Golan Heights. A main issue being considered is Zadorov's confession, which he later recanted. Rada's body was found in a locked bathroom stall with her neck slashed and stab wounds on her body. Multiple forensic experts have weighed in on what type of knife was used and what shoe was worn by the killer. Zadorov worked as a maintenance man at the school. He was sentenced to life in prison in 2010. Israel is taking the Ebola virus threat seriously and has not only expanded screening for passengers arriving at Ben Gurion Airport, but hospitals are also getting ready for dealing with potential victims. At Hadassah Hospital in Ein Kerem, a special ward was set aside to treat Ebola victims, and staff trained on the special precautions necessary to quarantine them and prevent the spread of the virus to hospital personnel.
The Ebola virus may come to Israel from one of the surrounding countries in Africa, mostly the 3 countries where Ebola is now present. And we have to be prepared to accept a patient who visited one of these 3 countries, and within 21 days, which is the incubation period for Ebola, he comes down with symptoms of illness, firstly with fever and sometimes some other illnesses, and then we have to expect the possibility that he has Ebola. Ebola is different. It does not pass by the air, it is not airborne, so we are not afraid to be infected just by being around the patient, but I think that we must be very careful since this is an extremely dangerous disease with a mortality of over 50%. So although the chances of contracting Ebola are slim, are small, the danger is big, and therefore we must be careful. And I think there is anxiety when the first patient will come. We will try to do our best to help each other so that we protect our staff and that no one will get infected from the patient.
Last week, Israel held a drill at the airport to practice identifying patients. Now, flights from Africa are being diverted to Terminal 1, where passengers will be questioned by medics and tested for fever. So far, there have been no diagnosed cases of the virus in Israel. This comes as the world was taking measures to contain the deadly virus. The 3 countries stricken by Ebola are Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea. The World Health Organization has taken Senegal and Nigeria off the list of Ebola-affected nations due to their measures. On the 17th of October, Senegal came off the list of countries classified as Ebola affected. On the 20th of October, which is Monday, Nigeria will also come off the list because they were very successful in controlling imported cases of Ebola. The Associated Press has concluded a 2-year investigation which found that dozens of Nazi concentration camp guards collected and are still collecting millions of dollars in Social Security payments. Jewish groups and U.S. lawmakers say they will fight to end that practice. We get more from the Associated Press.
Jacob Denzinger once lived the American dream with a thriving plastics company in Akron, Ohio, and investments in oil and real estate. That was before the Nazi hunters found him and he fled to Germany. Denzinger is 90 years old, but in World War II he was a guard at Auschwitz, the notorious Nazi death camp. Now he lives in the picturesque town of Osijek in his native Croatia and is paid about $1,500 a month in Social Security, underwritten by the American taxpayer. Denzinger refused to speak to the Associated Press on camera, but a neighbor described him.
I don't know about the pension. I've never asked about that, but I know he's a very wealthy man.
Payments flowed through a legal loophole which allowed dozens of death camp guards and suspected Nazi war criminals to be paid millions of dollars in Social Security benefits.
The United States of America, the country that was one of the two principal leaders in leading the fight against the Nazis, is rewarding these perpetrators by paying them money and pension.
Rabbi Marvin Heyer, who heads the Simon Wiesenthal Center in Los Angeles, wants an end to the payments. The loophole gave the U.S. Justice Department leverage to persuade Nazi suspects to leave the country. If they had been deported, they would have lost their benefits. But if they left voluntarily, returned to their homeland, and renounced their U.S. citizenship, they were legally allowed to keep their Social Security pensions. The Justice Department denied using these payments as a tool for removing Nazis. Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney also says the payments must stop.
So this loophole needs to be closed. I will work hard to close it.
A 2-year investigation by the Associated Press has found at least 38 Nazi suspects who left the United States and kept their Social Security benefits. The AP also found at least 4 are still alive. These include Denzinger and another man, Martin Hartmann. He is a former SS guard at the Sachsenhausen concentration camp in Germany. Hartmann moved to Berlin in 2007, just before being stripped of his U.S. citizenship. He is still being paid Social Security, according to a person with knowledge of his finances who wished to remain anonymous.
You can pick up an ID.
Memories of the Third Reich death camps are still vivid for Stephen Femves, who works at the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C.
Kids were dying right and left. Minimal food, once a day run to the latrine, the stench, the filth, it's hard to describe.
The Croatian authorities have just opened an investigation into Denzinger. Whatever the outcome, he knows his final resting place. His grave and tombstone already built. The only thing left is to chisel in the date of his death. David Bruns, The Associated Press.
Protesters are expected to gather outside Lincoln Center in New York City tonight as a controversial opera about a Palestinian terror attack is set to open. IBA's Ellie Wagalanter has more.
The New York Post calls it dangerous. The Daily News calls it grotesque. Those are the reviews of the Metz opera, The Death of Klinghoffer. It glorifies terrorism and the murder of a Jewish-American businessman in cold blood. Drawing a moral equivalence between terrorism and its victims is just obscene.
Obscene or not, the controversial opera about the hijacking of the Achille Lauro and the murder of Leon Klinghoffer will debut tonight at the Metropolitan Opera in New York. Klinghoffer was a disabled American Jewish tourist and passenger killed in 1985 by Palestinian Liberation Front terrorists, who then pushed his body and wheelchair overboard. Since its first performance more than 20 years ago, critics have charged the composer John Adams the death of Klinghoffer is anti-Israel and anti-Semitic. The opera's director says the performance doesn't judge either side, while Adams maintains that the opera is an attempt to look at the terrorists and the passengers and see humanity in both of them.
The most important thing about this opera is it doesn't assume that it has any answers to anything that it's addressing. It's saying, let's spend some time wrestling with the very difficult questions that arise from this very difficult conflict.
The Death of Klinghoffer's been around now for 23 years. Every time it's produced, there's controversy. I didn't compose the opera to court controversy. In fact, I I was a bit appalled at how hot some of the response was, and there have been people, including many esteemed writers and music critics, who have said that this opera should never be performed because it's too sensitive. Our opera tries to look at the terrorists and the passengers and see humanity in both of them, and for some people that's an egregious mistake.
Demonstrations have already been held to protest the false symmetry between the perpetrators and their victim, and another rally is being called for tonight at the opening.
If you bash certain groups in this world, you're labeled a bigot. But if you bash Jews, you're hailed as a creative genius. Let us not fall for this argument that some try to use over there of censorship. This is not about censorship. This is about making choices. And as was said by David Weprin, Boston closed the opera. They canceled it out of choice. California did it out of choice. And New York, the Guggenheim, did it out of choice. Not because they were censored, but because they said when you take something like this about an elderly Jew being thrown overboard in a wheelchair, that's inappropriate.
A statement by Lisa and Ilse Klinghoffer, the daughters of Leon Klinghoffer, will be featured in an ad in the show's playbill condemning how the opera rationalizes, romanticizes, and legitimizes the terrorist murder of our father. Ellie Wogelanter, IBA News.
An Israeli Arab doctor who secretly joined the Islamic State and fought in Syria has been killed. In May this year, Atman Abdul-Kian, 26, from the southern Bedouin village Hura, failed to show up at the Soroka Hospital in Beersheba, where he was to have begun a one-year internship. According to reports, he set out for Turkey, where he crossed the border into Syria to join the jihadi extremists. Abdel-Kian studied medicine in Jordan and began his residency at the Barzilai Hospital in Ashkelon. His family confirmed they had been notified of their son's death and added, had they known his intentions, they would have done everything in their power to prevent him from joining ISIS. American military aircraft dropped weapons, ammunition, and medical supplies to Kurdish forces fighting Islamic State in the Syrian border town Kobani. Last night, U.S. military officials said 3 C-130 transport planes dropped some 27 packages to Kurdish forces. They said the aircraft flew without escort and did not face any resistance from the ground. The airdrops are likely to anger the Turkish government, who said it would oppose any transfer of arms to Kurdish fighters, who they view as an extension of the Turkish Kurd group PKK, who has waged a 30-year insurgency in Turkey demanding independence. The PKK has been designated by American and NATO countries a terror group. In recent days, ISIS has poured heavily armed reinforcements into the town. The U.S. Central Command said it has conducted more than 135 airstrikes on ISIS targets in and around Kobani in an effort to slow down their advance. In more local news, a car accident on Highway 90 near Yahel left 6 people injured, including 4 in serious condition, 1 and 2-month-old baby suffering from head injuries, and a woman in her 30s. 2 other children are in moderate condition. The accident occurred when a truck collided head-on with a car. The injured were airlifted to Soroka Hospital in Beersheba. Police are investigating the incident. The results of the high school matriculation exams are in. The report released by the Education Ministry today found that the top results went to the community of Kochav Yair, with 93.4% of students receiving matriculation certificates in 2012 and 2013. Students living in the Druze community of Beit Jan in the north ranked second, with 92% found eligible. The Haredi community, Modi'in Elite, came in last on the list, with only 7.2% of high school students found eligible, and the ultra-Orthodox city Bnei Brak showed no change from the previous year, with 10.2% of students found eligible. The complete list of results is available on the Ministry of Education website. All eyes were on the new Pais Arena in the capital last night, where Hapoel Jerusalem hosted Hapoel Tel Aviv in its first Premier League basketball game in their new home. But the nearly $400 million venue, which was just recently completed, could not weather the heavy rain which leaked into the arena through the supposedly top-of-the-line roof. Fortunately, the showers ended before the game started, and the court was dry by tip-off time. The still unbeaten Jerusalem Hoopsters raised their record to 3-0 as they defeated Hapoel Tel Aviv by just 1 point, 81-80, in a very exciting match. With just seconds to go until the final buzzer, Tel Aviv was up by 1 point, but a controversial foul by Matan Naor took Jerusalem to the free throw line and gave them the victory. American Dante Smith was the game's MVP, scoring 23 points, 10 assists, and 6 rebounds. After the win, he spoke with Israel Television sports reporter Lian Vildau.
Came off a little soft tonight for whatever reason, but it's a great team. They made a lot of shots, they made a lot of great plays, and I'm just happy we came out on top.
Something about the atmosphere here in your new home?
I mean, the atmosphere is always great, and that's what makes you come to play every night, and I couldn't ask for much more.
Thank you very much. Good luck.
Thank you.
Taking a look at local finance, and the shekel was down in foreign currency trading, while share prices on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange were also down. Here's a look at the late afternoon numbers. Turning to the forecast, and no change expected in the fall weather conditions tomorrow. Here are the highs and lows for the next 24 hours. And that's all for this newscast. Please join us again tomorrow.